right off with Fernando Salvetti, our first speaker. So we're going to turn it over to Fernando, who we're excited to hear from about crisis management.
Hi. Okay, it's time to fly, not only to stay in a surgical theater, even if right now we are about to mix the two, flying and saving life. And from the very beginning, I'm proposing you such a mixed environment where we are mixing two different approaches: healthcare simulation, and avionics and aviation simulation. The military, because we are working in the aviation mainly with the military, the Italian Air Force, the Emirati Air Force, and some other military aviations. And healthcare, we are working mainly in between Italy, Switzerland, and the United States. For this presentation, my colleagues that were engaged in order to develop those experiences are Roxanne Garner, Rebecca Meinhardt, Cristiano Galli, and Barbara Bertani. Roxanne and Rebecca are from Boston. They have a center for medical simulation. Cristiano was from the Italian Air Force, a general. Now is a civil instructor teaching leadership to the officers, Air Force officers from the Arab Emirates Air Force. So now he's based in Abu Dhabi. And Barbara is my business partner in between Turin, Italy, Lugano, Switzerland, and Houston, Texas. As I was saying, both healthcare and aviation are sharing, and since a number of decades, at least 3 decades, are sharing the simulation environment as an effective way to teach both technical and behavioral skills. Sometimes outputs are also in terms of cognitive and metacognitive skills that are really honed starting from a simulation environment. So there is a cockpit and there is a surgical theater, because are the two iconic places where CRM, crisis resource management, or also crew resource management are performed. The junction in between crisis and crew is the typical situation during which simulation may reach the best outputs, because there is a team, so a crew, both in the military or also in the civil aviation, as well as within a surgical theater. The team has to perform as a crew and has to reach results, saving lives. They own lives, usually within aviation, and patients' lives within healthcare. Aviation means mainly the risk related to crashes, mortal crashes. Healthcare means risks. Many times, again, the death is behind the corner, related to the patient's lives. So we are talking about two very challenging simulation scenarios. Let's start with aviation, just to share some more info. Info directly provided by General Cristiano Galli, a colleague of mine who is teaching the aircraft officers. And I can say and share with you that in modern aviation, for skill training, so for the so-called soft and cognitive skills, soft or behavioral and cognitive, sometimes also metacognitive skills, a simulation setting is very useful, mainly because situational awareness, problem solving in a very quickly evolving situation are expected to be honed directly within the simulation setting. It's like a cockpit. Sometimes the simulation setting is the cockpit. And the cockpit is both for growing technical skills and situational awareness, leadership, time management, managing emotions under pressure. So there are different highly realistic cockpits in order to foster both technical and behavioral, cognitive and metacognitive skills. This is another example of a cockpit. Is less realistic. The only really highly realistic element is this, is augmented reality, overlaying of information over the front window of a cockpit. Those are pretty realistic comments, but for sure this is a highly realistic cockpit. Sometimes we do not need the cockpit. Sometimes we only need, in order to perform at their best as pilots, soft cognitive and metacognitive skills, behavioral, cognitive and metacognitive, to perform as they were within an escape room. Already today I heard Gina from Israel talking about escape rooms. I talked 2 days ago again about escape rooms. Escaping a room lacking time is the essence of those type of simulations, where people are provided with contradictory info, because an information overload usually is highly expected, and the people are in need to solve problems in a way that in a simulation setting is better than everywhere outside the same room. Because within a simulation setting, they may interact with real or virtualized commands, tools, and so on. We are expected to measure the outputs, because this is a totally new project, starting from September. We were expected to start last year. We started a little bit, then coronavirus stopped all the tests we were performing, both in Milan Polytechnic School and in Rome Marconi University. So from September this year, we will start again trying to track and measure the behavioral outputs. Basically, high fidelity cockpits and low fidelity cockpits. High fidelity for mainly technical operations, low fidelity cockpits mainly for behavioral, cognitive and metacognitive skills to hone. And next year, I hope, next June in New York, we will be able to share the first output. Those are the outputs from the other field, healthcare. Very different fields. In this case, we are within the Mass General Hospital in Boston. We are talking about civil personnel. In the first case, we are talking about the military. So very different industries, very similar conditions and situations. Saving lives, lacking time, under a huge pressure. So very stressful situation. In this case, a checklist called Name, Claim, Aim is a checklist providing the basic elements in order to face a situation in a surgical theater or even in other different medical theaters. It's not so far from similar checklists that are usually employed within the aviation industry. So, a few words in order to recall is the reason why they are also called as mnemonics. What you have to perform under very, very difficult circumstances and in very highly stressful situations. In this case, you can take a quick look at what the surgeons, or generally speaking, medical doctors and nurses are expected to do and perform. First of all, nominating an event manager. Like in aviation, you have two pilots usually. One is overseeing operations, the other is really making the pilot. Same in healthcare. You have to have an event manager overseeing operations. Usually the event manager is not directly piloting, let's say, has mainly to oversee. And then additional roles, rules, suggestions are different technical fields, but the structure, cognitively speaking, is pretty the same. This is the way, within Mass General, the same checklist is differently visualized. It's the same name, claim, aim, but is a different knowledge visualization. This is a simulation room, not for pilots, but for medical doctors. In this case, they are not surgeons, they are medical doctors facing an outdoor situation, and there is the same checklist over a wall. The setting in this case is something like this. There is a control room monitorized a lot in order to control what is happening in the simulation room. And the aerial system works projecting over the walls a number of virtual objects. In this case, we have a 360 degrees rotating heart. We have another beating heart here. We have medical imagery about how the heart is working. We have a patient simulator here. Two technicians from the control room that may modify the info provided over the walls, as well as they from the control room may modify the performance of the patient simulator. So the heart conditions and so on. Same within aviation. Flight simulator, as you can easily figure out, is a place where unexpectedly something changes. So you have to face unexpected conditions in a few seconds, and you are put in danger in a few seconds. If you are a pilot or a co-pilot, you are put in danger yourself as a person, as a professional. If you are a medical doctor or nurse, your patient is put in danger, also of life. Both the situations are very similar. Crew resource management or crisis resource management are converging in order to suggest, to hone both technical and behavioral, cognitive, metacognitive skills, because professionals have to perform very sophisticated, very complicated activities, and they are in need to face many times something really challenging in order to be prepared for the real life. Usually In aviation, 1 hour within a flight simulator, a high fidelity flight simulator, is equal to 1 hour real flying time. So the equation is 1-to-1 in aviation. Not the same in healthcare, even if there are a lot of credits granted if people are attending an healthcare simulation room, and usually they pay a reduced fee for their professional insurance. Because the simulation, also in healthcare, is recognized as a very effective strategy or training approach in order to hone competencies that have to be performed in the real world. So the bridge in between the simulation room and the real world is really strong. For healthcare, we already performed some tests and checks on a pretty high number of people. The latest are about 62 people that attended in 6 different cohorts interprofessional medical education. And our results are mainly about speed and ease of learning, engagement and enjoyment during learning, effective understanding about technical operations, cognitive retention, and confidence and readiness in applying once back at work. And we can say that we are reaching high percentages in terms of mainly increased speed and ease of learning, as well as engagement. So it's not only enjoyment, it's mainly speed of learning and increased ability to perform. We are about to start other experiments in order to perform better measurement on a larger number of attendees, because better being not sure about the results, first of all because we are in conflict of interest, because we are the guys that are instructionally designing the solution, and because number of people expected to perform under experimental conditions are necessary in order to be sure about saying that we are really reaching good results. But for the moment, we may say that the path we are following with Ariel seems to be very promising, and the first measurement seems to be very good. Thank you so much for attending again, and happily, many for you, is the last time I'm talking. 4 times in 3 days are really too much. Sorry, and sorry also for my Italian English, but it's the only English I'm able to talk. And I'm available if there are any questions.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. It's always good to have you talk. Thanks for spending so much time this week. So there's questions. If we have questions in the chat, please go ahead and type them. Also, one thing I noticed on one of your last slides is you mentioned that there were some people who were uncomfortable with the idea of the room. It was overwhelming. They were getting used to it. What do you think that's going to change over time as people just sort of live in a different world, or are there things that you want to do to try to address those cases?
Frankly speaking, I do not know. The answer is I do not know.
Okay.
No.
It's too hard to tell.
Yes, and there are a lot of conditions, situations, factors that need to be better understood in order to be able to provide a real answer.
Okay. Right. I would say don't put a room in an actual airplane just yet. I think that's probably too much for people. I think that's where the line would be drawn. I think that would makes me dizzy just thinking about it. And so in terms of everything else, so let's talk a little bit about well, have you mentioned what do you think is next? So you've done these tests, that you've rolled out a lot of things with ERL already. What do you see as kind of the next steps to getting some of this, an even more widespread use than you're already seeing?
Next step should be effective holograms out of the glasses. Sometimes we merge HoloLens or the old Movirio, producing holograms over the lenses. A few times we use 18,000 lumens projectors. Very powerful, but very difficult to manage in a standard simulation setting in order to produce holograms 3D and visible without wearing any head-mounted display. So without glasses, without special glasses. Merging real holograms in a simulation setting, in my opinion, is one of the next expected pretty regular setting, even if right now we are in need to reduce the number of lumens. Because from a technical side, the projectors that are producing holograms today are not really fitting well with the average measurement of the places where we can install a simulation lab. Anyway, holograms, human-sized holograms, real-time broadcasting holograms, dense enough to perceive the depth of the hologram without the special glasses are, in my opinion, next step, pretty realistic to reach in a few months or a year and a half, maybe, I hope, because projectors are doing better and better from the technical side. And this is one. The other, in my expectation, is mixed reality. A real mixed or hybrid reality. I know sometimes theoretically we have to distinguish in between mixed and hybrid. I'm trying to merge mixed and hybrid. And in my opinion, mixed or hybrid reality with actors performing from a wall, a projector wall, other actors and learning facilitators performing in the real place, holograms, robots, cobots, and sensorized objects are what we are expecting because we are part of the 4.0 technological revolution, and because in Japan the government is putting a lot of money over the table in order to develop the so-called Society 5.0. So collaboration in between human and machines, in my opinion, will be another frontier, easy to reach also for educators and trainers in general.
Yeah, no, that's great. There's so much to be done. That's coming fairly soon. Too. So we have a question from Beth Barber, which is, have you seen the Cave immersion learning from Boston, which she said uses projectors and Unity 3D and game controllers? Is something you've run across?
The question is if ERL is a cave.
I think it's there's something called Cave. She's mentioned Cave immersive learning, Cave technologies.
Cave was the benchmark we started from in order to develop ERL. Cave is pretty an old concept because was designed originally in between Chicago and Paris during the 80s. Cave means using special glasses in order to perceive three-dimensionally the virtual objects. We don't within ERL. Cave means using usually joysticks. 80% of the existing caves are in need to have learners manipulating virtual objects by and via joysticks. We do not. And caves are mainly real projected. So caves are mainly based on big screens. Only a few new caves are working with a front projection system. But in my experience, they are not worthy the huge amount of money that you have to spend. A small cave costs $300,000 till 1 million. Real cost 10, 12 times less. In my opinion, is too much money for an artificial experience. Too much joystick, glasses, and so on. But for sure, yes, Real belongs to the cave family, but developed thanks to the ultra short throw projectors.
Okay. Wow, great. And yeah, there's so much that can be done with it, and I think your goals of a very natural user experience are sort of at the heart of a lot of things that make the technology work. And Donna mentioned she sees your system in hospitals, schools, and government buildings for training, and certainly you've been already in the medical area quite a bit. So there's a lot there.
We are in medical area, we are in STEAM education. Sometimes we try to expand the STEAM to STEM, so also the arts, let's say. We are sometimes within museums, for sure within selected schools. There is a lot of room in order to develop. It's a question related to pricing, but it's mainly a cultural issue. Lot of teachers, trainers, instructors, in my opinion, have to slightly change their own mindset. And they have to accept that we can easily meet people within hybrid environments, performing a lot of things, old or new, in different ways. Keeping also the traditional face-to-face lessons or the more innovative flipped classrooms, but there is a room really for innovation.
Great. All right, one last question, just if we can have a quick answer before we go from Christina. In your view, will the learners of the future need more time to recover from learning? So you kind of, is there sort of do you change the timing of things? Now you go from class to class, whether that's good or not, but here you're going through such a deep, immersive, emotional experience. What's your sense of recovery time, or is it again too hard to know and needs further study, which I would totally understand?
In my opinion, it's time to merge emotions with rationality. It's time to allow regular and standard teachers, instructors, trainers to deliver feedback about both the emotional and human side, as well as the cognitive and the knowledge side of the performance, as they are already very used to handle and to perform, using technology. There are ways in order to recognize emotions. It's culturally very challenging. It's not easy at all. Also technologically, it's very difficult. But there are ways and means in order to merge this area with the most common areas that we are used to deal with within traditional education.
All right, okay, I'd love to talk more. I've got more questions coming in, but we are out of time for now. We have Fernando's email up. I think if there are additional questions and maybe people to partner with and all kinds of things. Great to see you as always. Look forward to seeing you in person again next year, and I'm sure we'll be in touch between now and then.
For sure. Thank you so much. All the best.
Thanks again. All right, great talking to you. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again, Fernando. So coming up next,